Ladies and gentlemen, my name is TotalBiscuit. I'm here to ask and answer one simple question. WTF is Enemy Front. It's another first-person shooter by a developer that has done quite a few of those lately called City Interactive. You might remember their previous title that was also looked at on this channel called Alien Rage. Alien Rage Unlimited, specifically. Wasn't brilliant. Not terrible, but not brilliant either. And they also did the Sniper Ghost Warrior games and a number of other different things. It's weird to call them like a budget publisher because they're really not, and they're certainly not a budget developer either. They make games that are actually pretty high fidelity, but just seem like they don't have the experience to properly deliver on the promises they're making there. A lot of them also have PC-specific issues, which makes very little sense because most of them are PC-specific games, which makes me scratch my head in a big way. And now along comes Enemy Front, the latest game from that developer. And is it any good, is the question? Have they managed to learn? Well, this one comes in the form of the CryEngine, so it certainly looks pretty good. Question is, does it play any good? It's a terrible sentence. Let's go on and have a look at what it has in terms of its options menu. It's got a very shiny options menu, doesn't it? It's slanted, look at that. Look at the stylization on that. And that eagle moves around when you click. It's a reasonable amount of effort that's been put into that, certainly. So, resolution options, full screen, on or off, VSync. This is actually a problem. So, here's what you need to do if you're going to play this game. Do not turn on VSync. If you do, it is going to drop frames in a horrible fashion. Not only that, but if it drops too many, it'll actually reduce the frame rate of the game to 30 for a while. Like, it will sync it up that way. It's really, really bad. I turned this off, and my frame rate almost doubled in some places. In fact, it more than doubled in some places. The problem is, with VSync off, there's a horrible amount of tearing, just huge amounts. I have never seen as much tearing in a game with VSync off. Usually I can play with VSync off with most titles and not really have too much of a tearing problem. This, yeah, it's got tearing. So what I did was I forced adaptive VSync on via the NVIDIA control panel. That seems to have got rid of the tearing without knocking the frame rate on the head. Although it did cause a couple of problems with loading the game. It defaulted to windowed even though it was in full screen. I had the game crash once when I tried to load it. Bit weird. So yeah, there's a few VSync problems here. Outside of that, this is supposed to be the graphics options menu, but of course this is only basic. So you got your DirectX modes there. If you want more performance, go for DirectX 9. I've kept it on DirectX 11. And then your graphics quality preset. If you go to advanced, that's when you can actually mess around with things. So everything I've got up to maximum. These ones don't go to high, these ones go to very high, and so on and so forth. Nothing really out of the ordinary here. You've got post-processing, which we have no idea what that even means these days, unfortunately. They used to call it, of course, AA and AF, and they'd have different kinds of it, so you know exactly what it did. But here it's just post-processing. Okay, so is that AF? Is that AA? What kind of AA? We don't know. It's a mystery. If you want to dig in the config files, I'm sure you'll be able to find a little bit more information. But outside of that, you can pretty much just customize whatever you want here. And then your gamma options too, if you want to mess with that. Conspicuous by its absence, as pretty much every single City Interactive game known to man is a field of view slider. Thankfully, you can alter the field of view by going into the config files. I'll put a link to how to do that in the description below this video. And I have noticed actually no negative effects from doing that whatsoever in the game. I think the only thing I noticed was in one turret section, it looked like the gun wasn't quite long enough. Outside of that, the game looks totally fine at higher FOV, and frankly, you'll need it there because the default FOV is stupidly low. I don't get it. Like, they make PC games. What are they doing? Thankfully, it's an easy fix. Alright, so, mouse, here you go, mouse sensitivity. This is all kind of nicely stylized, but it's unnecessarily so. Like, that is one really giant menu for only two options. This could have all very easily been in the same place. Keyboard controls, you can mess around with that. You can rebind them as you desire. They're pretty simple, honestly. There's no controls which are really out of the ordinary for anything that you're doing here. This should all be very, very predictable. It's a standard 2 rifle plus 1 pistol weapons inventory setup, plus a couple of kinds of grenades that all have their individual buttons. But there's things like the ability to throw stones. There's actually a fairly functional stealth system in the game. A map, taking stuff, binoculars, which can be used to spot, and the just generic F action button. And there's your multiplayer, which is all chat, team chat. We'll have a brief look at the multiplayer, but we'll be focusing primarily on the single player because the multiplayer is very bare bones and is honestly not really worthy of your time. The single player is where the meat is, so let's jump in, shall we, and continue where we left off. This is it's probably about 2.5, maybe 3 hours into the game, at my estimate. My Steam time is telling me 4, but I think that's a little much. I did have it alt tab for a little while, so that's probably why. There doesn't appear to be anywhere else to track the gameplay timing. Nicest loading screen known to man, isn't it? They have this whole freeze frame thing going on in the CryEngine. It's really quite pretty. Also a way to show off just how good the orange is in the CryEngine. Look at that. So it's not too shabby. There's some nice and sometimes kind of brutal scenes. Alright, so here we go. Not really sure what's up with that loading, but there you go. Now, you might notice that I can't go back. That's predictable. The last mission, actually, this is a continuing mission, had barely any load screens. Like, the mission was huge. Really, really large map. And actually, quite a few of the maps in this game are surprisingly big. Although, it alternates between present day, which is mostly in Poland, I believe, part of the Warsaw Rebellion, and the memories of the main character. So, more often than not, in the main character's flashbacks, you're sneaking around on your own in some fairly wide open levels that can actually be approached in a number of different ways, which might surprise you. You might think, well, this just looks like Call of Duty. It's very much a World War II shooter. And to some degree, you would be right, but there's actually far less scripted nonsense in the flashback sequences. Far more freedom to just kind of sneak around and do what you want to do. And there's things like stealth kills available. The stealth system actually, as I said before, is quite robust. It works well. There is your fairly standard sort of stealth bar to the side, which is that curve around the main minimap. And once that goes fully up to red, that means that people have detected you on the minimap. You'll see orange, I believe, is actively hunting. Yellow is alert, but they don't really know where you are. And most of the time, the way that they actually interact with you in terms of stealth is fair and reasonable. And that actually surprised me, because a lot of games like this don't do stealth all that well. Stealth is viable, and of course, with the combination of being able to throw stones and identify your enemies and mark them by using the binoculars, you can actually sneak around quite effectively. There's a couple of silenced weapons as well, and things like melee kills are available. You can also take enemies hostage and use them as body shields. This is a silent Sten, as you probably noticed. There we go. There we go. It's not particularly good at range, but we might eventually be able to kill him. What a waste of ammo, good lord. But outside of what you're seeing there, it's pretty much a run-of-the-mill World War II shooter. It doesn't really have any unusual mechanics outside of the stealth system, and even that's not that unusual. It's just pretty well implemented. And actually, that's how I'd describe the game in a nutshell. A well-implemented, competent World War II shooter, which is actually high praise if I'm aiming at City Interactive, because they've had some interesting ideas, but generally they aren't competent enough to really make them work well. This time around, not only is it a pretty good-looking game, I mean, yeah, texture quality is not incredible, but for the most part, the lighting effects, if a little bit overdone, are quite nice. It's colorful, nice sky, nice weapon models, nice weapon animations as well, actually. What I was really impressed by is that a lot of the guns actually have 2 different animations for reloading, depending on whether or not you are completely out of ammo or just reloading with a partially full magazine. And a lot of them are pretty accurate to the guns as well. There's an old silenced pistol that you can get. I think it's called the Walton or something like that. And you've got to eject each round manually through the back, because apparently that was the way that they did it. They didn't have a muzzle brake or anything like that. And when you reload the thing, you actually just take the top of the gun off and then sort of replace the magazine. And it was just a little bit of attention to detail that I liked. They could have done a very generic reload animation on that, but for the most part, they actually put a lot of effort into the reload animations. Even the MG42s, you see some surprisingly, I wouldn't say accurate, but authentic reload animations that really do vary quite nicely. And the Luger's a great example of that, actually. I'm going to probably alert them with this, of course, you know. Again, the stealth system works well, as you can see. But if I reload from here, it's just a standard reload. But if I empty the magazine, what it's going to do is it's going to pop the top up, and then you're going to have to cock it properly. It's just, you know, nice little bit of attention to detail that you wouldn't necessarily expect out of what you would have thought was kind of a throwaway World War II shooter. It's like, oh great, you know, they're making something as generic as possible. But while the game might be fairly generic, they actually put a decent amount of effort into it, and it's hard actually not to respect that. The gunplay's pretty enjoyable as well. The game has a reasonable amount of kick to it. It's still kind of fairly arcadey, a lot of aim down sight stuff, and they even threw this Sniper Elite copy nonsense in there every now and again, which doesn't look anywhere near as good as Sniper Elite, of course, but it only happens every now and again. I wish you could turn that off, though. That would be nice. It's very... I wouldn't say Call of Duty-esque gunplay, because there's a bit more to it than that. There's a little bit more kick, but it's definitely not realistic gunplay either. Ah, an MG42, that's fun. Actually turn it all the way around here. Sounds good, too. The weapon sounds are actually really, really good. Let me try and empty... I'm not sure if I can actually empty the magazine on this thing to show you the reload animation. It's not too long, but it's really quite nice. You see what I'm talking about? It's actually pretty good. Not too shabby at all. I've seen a different animation for that as well, where they end up like pulling out a pin from the front of it. Although that might have been a different machine gun. That might not have been an MG42. Oh yeah, I think, you know, you get the idea. And there's some silly little canned stealth kills and things like that every now and again. What is kind of neat, if you try to melee the enemy from the front more often than not, and I'm going to just toss this just so I can show you as many different kinds of weapons as possible. When you try to melee an enemy from the front, sometimes they will actually, like, fight you back, and they'll pull out things like a shovel, yeah, just a shovel, you know, those entrenchment tools. And they'll try and beat you to death with it, and you've got to try and kill them before they kill you, which I thought was kind of neat, instead of every melee kill being an instant kill. Kills from the back are usually instant kills, but... Again, just surprising attention to detail. Now, the thing where... The game is kind of a game of two halves, right? And... I like the flashback sequences a lot more than I like the... It's weird to say present day, but you get what I'm talking about there. This is what's going on right now in this character's life sequences, which are parts of the Warsaw Rebellion. You end up joining the resistance in Poland, and you interact with a couple of different characters. That's mostly scripted sequences, where it's like, oh god, we're being attacked, we're gonna go do this, hey, go get on the gun, and so on and so forth. Very Call of Duty-esque. These flashback sequences are actually very open-ended, and the levels are large, and usually give you a reasonable amount of choice as to how you want to approach it. Definitely not Far Cry level of that, where you could explore absolutely everywhere. There's definitely some restrictions, but as you can see, this is a fairly large village level, and there's areas where I can explore to try and find secrets, extra ammo, grenades, molotovs, and of course better weapons. You know, I found the Sten sort of nestled away on a bed, and of course in this level the Sten's very useful. I could run around with an MP40, but if I did that, then I'm going to alert every guard in the vicinity, so the silent Sten is a bit of a better weapon, even if it's not quite as good at range. Where is he? Oh. That doesn't sound good. There's a MG42 somewhere. Might want to watch out for that. And these levels are good. Like, they really are. Surprisingly good. They're pretty well designed, and every now and again you get a secondary objective as well. Some of those are time-based, which is quite nice. You'll come across, say, a small pocket of resistance being attacked, and you've got to go and try and help them out. And if you succeed in doing that, they'll often like give you a weapon or some ammunition or a few grenades or something like that. Or sometimes it'll just be a thank you. And there's, you know, there's other little things as well, like destroy this half track. And usually the only benefit to that is the half track won't shoot at you as you're trying to leave the level. But it's nice that they threw that in there, and the levels are large and expansive, and there's plenty to do in them. Obviously, it's not realistic. You can definitely take a good number of gunshots, even on the hardest difficulty level, but it's not like I haven't died before. There's actually quite a lot of enemies, and if you alert too many of them, you can be in a really nasty situation. Where is he? He spotted me somehow. Get out my 98. There we go. Again, good reload animation on that, too, with the stripper clip. There we go. Where is he? And there's someone over there. Where's he gone? There you go. Off with the hat. Yeah, it's of much higher quality than what I've seen from City Interactive in the past, and I've said this many times before, if a company that produces traditionally either mediocre or bad games is actually visually and visibly improving, then that should be lauded. That should be, you know, that's a joyful thing. Because that means that instead of having kind of a trashy developer, we have someone that really knows what they're doing and can actually produce an interesting product that is worthy of your money. This car will not explode, and that disappoints me greatly. I don't even know where this guy actually is. There he is. Alright, have some of that. And while it may be a very generic setting, and the game doesn't really do anything, like, too out of the ordinary in terms of World War II shooters, what it does well. Like, and it's competent at what it does. Are there any problems with it? Yeah, sure. Some of the scripted sequences aren't particularly good. The voice acting is a bit of a mixed bag. Strangely enough, the Polish characters are really well voice acted, at least in my opinion. I can't hit a damn thing with this. The sight on this is absolutely useless. This was like, I actually fired one of these at a shooting range. There we go. In Vegas, and I was pretty bad with it there, too. There we go. Just empty the magazine on that, just because it's fun to fire. So, voice acting is not brilliant. The story's kind of throwaway, although I do like the focus on Poland. I think that's pretty good. We had one very recently that was focused on Poland, and it was just terrible. And I said, you know what, this would be a really interesting battle to cover in a better game, and this is actually a better game that covers it quite well. So, give them applause for that. I suppose it does help they're a Polish developer, so they're a bit passionate about that particular subject. It includes some kind of dodgy features. Like, it seems like they did try and cannibalize a lot of similar games. Like, they put the good old slowdown thing from Sniper Elite in, but it wasn't quite as good. They put in some strange stuff like the door breaching from Medal of Honor Warfighter. I don't remember anyone saying that was a good thing. It's the whole kick in the door, it slows down, kill everyone in the room before something horrible happens. That didn't need to be there. There's definitely some very strange cannibalization going on that I think is, frankly, for the most part, unnecessary. Ah! Bollocks. Well, that's what I get for sitting in front of an MG42. I suppose that is my own problem. What I would also say is that a lot of the checkpoints are very spaced out, so expect to replay a good number of things, which includes scripted sequences, unfortunately. So I'm not too keen on that. There seems to be a quick load button, but I'm pretty sure it only loads the last checkpoint. I'm pretty sure there is no actual legitimate quick save. So you can't save in the middle of a mission or anything. So if you do go down to something like that, then expect to have to replay that mission, or at least part of that mission in a big way, which is not brilliant. And I'm also not the world's biggest fan of the two-weapon system, but I guess you can argue authenticity on that point. Graphically, it's, like I said, fairly impressive, although it does suffer from some foliage popping in a big way and some inconsistent lighting effects. Like, so, have a look at this tree right here, okay? And then, you see what I mean? Like, you've got foliage popping, which is a bit disconcerting, takes you out of the experience. It's not the worst thing to ever happen, but I say it's definitely there. It's kind of the mark of a smaller studio trying to use a very high-fidelity engine that they're maybe not quite as experienced with. But for the most part, they actually did a pretty damn good job with it. Like, it's still a good-looking game, for the most part. Lighting is excessive in places. They maybe took the bloom to an extreme, but it's not a bad looker at all. Not at all. You know, it's a... Definitely one of... I mean, we don't actually have that many great-looking World War II titles on the PC, and this one... Can I turn this all the way around? God, I hope so. This otherwise was a terrible idea. This one is one of the best-looking World War II shooters that we've got on PC. It's like, obviously those things have kind of gone out of style lately. But we do still have really good multiplayer titles like Rising Storm, and of course Red Orchestra 2. Anyone else? I don't think... Oh, hello. You know, I'm really glad they just let you spin this around the full 360 degrees. Instead of like, hey, here's a turret. Oh, you can't turn it in the way you need it to. Yup, you can. The only thing I suppose I'm missing is the ability to rip it off there. It's a bit unfortunate, I think, the timing of the release on this thing, actually, because it comes out shortly after Wolfenstein, which was well acclaimed and for very good reason, because it is a very, very good... Okay, there we go. That's another Sten, interesting. It was a very, very good single-player shooter, but it was more on the arcadey side of things. This one pretends to be a little bit authentic, although it's still very Call of Duty action hero-esque, just with a little bit less scripted nonsense. And even in the scripted sequences, there's actually quite a few times where you're not really held by the hand. Every now and again, you can't open a door till someone does, but most of the time, they seem to have moved away from that, so I've got to give them props for it. Now, if there's anything that's really throwaway about this game, unless you just want to treat the idea of a World War II shooter these days being throwaway in terms of concept, it's the fact that the game has a very forgettable multiplayer mode that was really obviously last minute and not thought through. It's only got 4 maps and about 3 game modes, and there's really nothing within the multiplayer mode that I would point to as being revolutionary in any way, or more to the point, actually just good, you know? Thankfully the Sten is very stealthy, as it turns out. It's just like bog standard run-of-the-mill World War II sort of deathmatch with a bit of a spin on the domination mode called radio transmission, where you have to capture various radio relay posts and complete a transmission. But that's really about it. Like, the game doesn't handle all that well in multiplayer. There's not a lot of team communication options. And it's just, here's some guns, go shoot. Like, that's really about it. There's no classes or anything like that. There's only a very limited selection of weapons available. No really big special abilities or anything like that. It's just, it's in there because it can be, and I'd never, ever recommend that you buy it for multiplayer. Ultimately, it's there for the single-player campaign, and it is maybe one of those games where you're going to look at it on a sale and say, oh yeah, I remember that. That game was actually alright, wasn't it? And the answer is yes. It actually was alright, and I've actually had a decent amount of fun with it. It's solid. Like, just the size of this level is very unusual. You don't usually see levels this large in games like this. And the amount of freedom that it gives you is quite liberating, really. Just like, here's your objective, and kill a bunch of stuff in the meantime. Reminds me quite a lot of the older Wolfenstein title, 2009, although maybe even a bit more freedom. So, yeah, it's competent, actually. And it's a decent good time. It's not that expensive, either. Like, the retail price for this is $30. Which I think is pretty reasonable. It's on like 20% off for a launch week discount, I believe. So that takes it about $24 or your regional equivalent. Would I buy a game like this for that? Yeah, I probably would, actually. That's a fair price for something like this, where it's pretty solid quality, although not incredible. Like, it definitely lacks that AAA polish. It's a bit janky in places, but it also does, like I said, some things a little bit better than AAA games do. Oh, good reload animations, interesting authenticity when it came to dealing with the polish and things like that. I kind of dig it. And a decent amount of weapon variety in there as well. Yeah, it's alright. It is alright. That's how I would describe Enemy Front in a nutshell. I haven't seen anything outside of the perspective of the main character yet, though. I don't know if they really feel like doing anything like that. Maybe doing anything from the German perspective. Like, so far, the Germans have just been depicted as villains, which, obviously, to some degree they were, but there's certainly a lot that I think they could do from telling the story from the perspective of a German army soldier who is really just fighting for his country, not for any kind of ideology or anything along those lines. I dig that, but this is not apparently going to be the game that does that. By the way, the MP40 actually handles the way an MP40 does. I fired one of these. And that is actually not only how an MP40 sounds, but how they fire. There's actually, if you fire it like this, there's so little kick on the thing. Really easy to control. So if you're saying, oh, this is like Call of Duty, it's just arcadey, bullet hosey, it's actually not. MP40s actually do handle like that. Anyway, you've had a decent look at one of the missions there. As I said, I think it's pretty alright, and it's definitely the kind of game that you should consider if you're into World War II and you're kind of starved for World War II shooters and you've played all the existing ones in single player and you don't want something that's kind of as silly as Wolfenstein is. But let's have a quick look at the multiplayer before we jump out of this. That's assuming it even works in the first place. Well, the game crashed, as I kind of pointed out. So, again, I think it's something to do with that VSync issue. Once I turned adaptive VSync on, this kind of started to happen. It hasn't been crashing in-game, it's just in loading screens. So, it's a bit annoying, but there you go. Hopefully they fix that. Okay, so we'll have a quick look at the multiplayer. Like I said, it is very forgettable. There's not really much to say about this, and there's not many people playing it either. I'd also say that its ping indicator is pretty weak. Like, as far as I know, there isn't one. Like, that's the big problem. I can go on, yeah, I can filter, and I can do this right here, but there's no actual visual ping indicator outside of this. And as you see, these are the only 4 maps available. And I think it's, yeah, okay, so it looks like Barricades is okay. I mean, this one, I guess, is in Russia. There's no way that that can be actually correct in terms of the max ping. No way. There's no way I'm getting 100 ping to a Russian server, but we'll try it out. This is some of the problem I've had, actually, because there's no proper ping indicator, it's very difficult to know whether or not you're going to go onto a laggy server, and it seems like the ping filtering doesn't work properly. So I had some really awful experiences when I played it last time. We'll see if I can actually join. Sometimes it just doesn't work. You're not missing much, like I said. It is a very, very generic multiplayer mode. You get a small selection of guns. You can pick primary, secondary, and pistol. You can pick your character model, which makes no difference in the long term, and then you just go around shooting people. That's it. That's all there is to it, at least as far as I can tell. Could not connect to the server. You know, this is definitely a similar problem to what I've been having previously. There's a dedicated one here. I don't know where it's hosted, though. So I don't know what ping this is going to be like, assuming I can even get into it in the first place. Oh, okay, so at least we can jump into that and give you a few minutes a look at the multiplayer. Again, you're not going to see too much. I'm pretty sure that the maps are mostly reused from the single player. In fact, I think we're jumping into a map that's very similar to what I was just in. So I suppose that will help a little bit. This is the radio transmission mode that I was talking about. The other were just deathmatch and team deathmatch. Nothing really out of the ordinary there. Unless there are unlockables available, and I believe that there aren't, as far as I can tell, because there's been, like, no list of them anywhere. These are the guns that you've got. The menu's actually a pain in the arse to navigate. So you've got, like, 3 different kinds of pistols. We'll take the Mauser there. Secondary weapon, MP40, Lightning, the PPSH-41, the Sten, trench gun. So a decent amount of stuff available there. And I think we'll go with the PPSH one. That's good. And then something that's a little bit more long-ranged. So we could have the STG-44, a scope sniper rifle, or just kind of a semi-automatic rifle. I guess that will do. And that's really about all you got going for you there. Alright, so let's rock and roll. This is a fun gun. I like this a lot, for obvious reasons. Good reload animations on this one too, actually. There you go. Smooth. Smooth. But yeah, multiplayer is just run around, shoot people, and try and capture objectives. That's really all I can say about it. It runs fairly well, but they needed to at least have something to distinguish this from every other multiplayer deathmatch game ever. And they kind of didn't. And apparently this gun is really inaccurate. Good to know. Either that or I'm lagging horribly, which, you know, there's not many ways I can tell that. There's a... Yeah, I don't know what that ping means. Like, that could be anything. So, couldn't bloody well tell you. I am afraid. The weapon models are actually a little bit smaller in this mode too. Yeah, they seem to be. I have a feeling that the field of view actually goes out a little bit for the multiplayer, and maybe it ends up stacking out. Hello. That hit, surely. I don't... You know, I like this gun a little bit more in the single player. I gotta admit. Hello! There we go. Problem solved. But this is all the multiplayer is, really. Capture points, run it round, but the... Ugh. I thought he was friendly. Maybe I just got killed by friendly fire, I don't know. Oh well. That's a bit of a shame. Missed opportunity there with the multiplayer, certainly. But the single player's solid. And that's how I describe the game. It's solid, it's competent, it's pretty good at what it does. It doesn't really do anything exceptional. It does most things pretty well. It's certainly cliché-ridden in terms of both mechanics and in terms of its storyline up to this point. There may be some big revelations later on, I do not know. But if all you're looking for is a competent World War II shooter with pretty good graphics, then that's what you will find here. And assets quality is high for the most part across the board in this title. This is, I think, the best thing that City Interactive has come up with so far. So it shows that they're growing as a developer, they're gaining confidence, they're able to produce high-fidelity games that make use of the mechanics properly and aren't a complete mess. They need to fix the field of view thing, but of course you can edit the config files to sort that out as well. So hopefully they can continue to do this, and then what I want to see from City Interactive is something a bit different, something that's not generic, because that's really what they've been making up to this point. Nail down the basics, which they seem to have done here with Enemy Front, and then make something interesting and unique. Enemy Front is certainly not unique. It does nothing really to stand out from the pack, but it's good at what it does on its own, and it can quietly truck along being a competent World War II single-player first-person shooter. So if that's what you're into, well, you can find it on Steam right now. Normal price is $30. Right now it's 20% off. I think it's for about a week or two after launch, probably during the Steam sale as well, so towards the end of June you should be able to find this for 20% off if you so desire. My name has been TotalBiscuit, taking a look at Enemy Front. Thank you very much for watching, folks, and I'll see you next time.